All right, so welcome to Strategic Conversations, where we're going to take the two practices and we're going to apply them to organizational strategy going forward. So over the next 4 weeks, we're going to cover 4 different areas. This first week, today, will be an introduction to strategic thinking and to the appreciative inquiry framework, which is SOAR. And you'll learn all about how to ask questions and do framing that fits into strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results. The next week, we will really dive more deeply into how do we foster strategic conversations and really support those conversations at all levels of the organization. So everybody's rowing in the same direction and moving from the individual level to the team, to the department, all the way up through the whole organization. And you'll have an opportunity to apply the SOAR framework to your own team or your own organization. In the third week, we're going to do an overview of the appreciative inquiry 5D cycle. It's what appreciative inquiry is most known for. The 5Ds, which is whole system engagement of discovery, dream, design, destiny, and or deploy, taking it forward, with the 50 being define and creating the focus of what you're doing. So you'll see some examples of that, and then you'll have the opportunity to actually create an affirmative topic and craft an appreciative inquiry, which is a set of questions into that affirmative topic. Then your homework, you'll have homework each week, but the homework for the last week is to actually design your own strategic conversation. And then the final week, you'll have an opportunity to present that to the group or to a smaller subgroup and get feedback, feed forward from members of your group around suggestions they may have for making it even better. So without further ado, Jackie and Sylvette are going to be taking you into the first module.
Woohoo!
Carrie.
Here we go. This is so exciting going into this now. So let's start off with a quote from Jackie and Sherry, where positive thoughts and heart meet, they create moments of possibilities. And really, if we think about it on our strategic conversations, that's what it's all about, is creating those possibilities so that we as individuals and organizations can grow. So moving on to our next chunk, we'll look at the objectives. And so we're going to understand the importance of strategic conversations and the role positive framing and generative questions play. So totally building on our last 4 weeks of conversations worth having. We'll adopt an appreciative inquiry and SOAR framework, strategic thinking. We'll recognize when and why strategic thinking is important. And finally, we're going to practice framing strategic conversations and asking strategic generative questions using the SOAR framework. So we'll have a breakout session, just as we have been doing recently, and we'll get to practice this. It is Pictionary time. So, wondering if you've played Pictionary before. If you haven't, I'm going to give you a brief overview of what Pictionary is. What one does is one member of the team will draw a picture and the other one has to guess what it is. Well, we're doing a slight variation on that, and I'm going to put up here for you a combination of words and pictures. And your job is to guess what it says. And I'd like you to put that in the chat box. All right, don't raise your hand. We're not shouting it out. Go ahead and put it in the chat box. And just to add a little spice to this, how about 100 points if you get it right? And I think that's being rather generous. Actually, maybe 101 because it is Tuesday morning. No, it's Wednesday morning. All right, so flex your fingers. Here we go. Ready, steady, go. What does this say? Put it in the chat box. What does it say?
Oh, Jamie.
And here we go. Linda, you were fast and furious there. We've got a computer in every house, a screen, a window. I like a mouse in every house. A monitor in every home, a connection in every house. Any more? Going once, going twice, going 3 times, and closing it out. It actually says a computer in every home. So if you've got home or house, you get 100 points. If you've got anything else, you can have 99 points, all right? Just because it's Wednesday morning. Excellent stuff. All right, we're up and running. Next frame, please. What I'd like to know now is, who said it? And what year do you think this person said it? So someone said a computer in every home. Who was it? What year did they say it? And 100 points for each correct answer. Ready, steady, go. Who said it? And we've got Mickey coming in with Bill Gates in 1985. We've got some Steve Jobs in 87. We've got Bill Gates in 69. Woo! Another Bill Gates, 85. Bill Gates, 84. Oh, I think we're leaning towards Bill Gates. Clive Sinclair. Now I'm going to have to look up Clive Sinclair. I'm not sure who that is. Dan, we might need an explanation in here, please. I've got Bill Gates, about 80. Right, closing this out in 3, 2, and 1. Survey says Bill Gates it was. Now, we did invite Bill to appear with us today, and he actually accepted originally, but then something cropped up for him, and he had to, he regretfully declined. So it was Bill Gates, and the year was Shock Horror Probe. A couple of you were back as far as 66. Oh, Suzette, you said 66. Someone else said 69. It was actually 1974 was when he said this. And it followed up in 1975, they added on a little bit more, which was a computer in every home running Microsoft software. Not sure what Steve Jobs thought about that. And of course, this could have well been said by Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, any of those guys, but it was actually Bill Gates in 1974. What does this tell us? The power of a vision, the power of strategy, and the power of strategic thinking. And where would we be today if we didn't have that vision from Bill Gates back in 1974, and obviously from Steve Jobs? So this moves us nicely into then, what is the meaning of strategy? Well, it's about determining how and describing how to achieve the goals and what it and by what means. And it's closely aligned with the vision and the mission of the organization. And the overall plan is then to achieve that goal. And the activities that are used here is that strategic thinking and strategic planning. As I mentioned earlier, it's still all about those conversations that we've learned through Conversations Worth Having. And so I'd like to chat in now. When you think about strategic conversations, what comes to mind? And also, who has them typically in your organization? So what words come to mind? Who has them? Go ahead and pop that in the chat box, please. And so we've got kindness and respect. Hopefully everybody has them. Yes. Powerful, visionary, it's correct. Thoughtful and meaningful. Jamie noting that it's leaders. Also Frederick saying senior managers and directors. Lisa, we're moving towards vision and mission. Purposefulness, that's a good word. How did you write that in this space of time, Lisa? Amazing. And resourcefulness you got in there. Liz is saying ideally everybody. Amy noting that it's generally management. Absolutely. And so if we can just move on to the next slide, a couple of thoughts coming in. We know typically in an organization, this is sort of a top-down approach. It starts at the top, then the executive management create their plans and their directives, and they slowly trickle it down through the organization to the employees. This also tends to be deficit-based, and the older model that's used is the SWOT analysis. That's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And if you haven't been introduced to that before, and Jackie's going to do a little bit more of an explanation of that in comparison with SOAR in a few moments. You also see management taking action on the tasks, or driving the action on the task and pushing it down to the employees, and essentially the employees comply. The outcome of this then is disengagement. We see entropy within the organization, wasted resources. It's hard to keep up with the rate of change. There's a struggle then to deal with complex challenges, and the long run is there's a lack of innovation. So what is the answer to this? Let's take a look. How can we reframe our strategic thinking? And we know that people really commit to what they create. So how, if you could just go to the next question, Tony, there we go. How can we involve all stakeholders in our strategy conversations? So if you've had experience or you have ideas, why don't you pop this in the chat box and just write down, how can we involve all of the stakeholders in the conversation? Dan is answering, everyone contributes. I'm not sure if that one was to the previous one or the large one. Martin's saying to a small or a large group. Carol, thank you, inviting everyone to weigh in. Oh, it does, absolutely, Jamie. It starts with those relationships, building them early and often, and getting close connectivity. You get some summits involved here, asking questions, sharing the vision and asking for contribution ideas. Yes, and hopefully in your organizations, your vision should be plastered on every wall, right? And everybody should be able to quote it. And they connect, and also if we can connect our daily tasks to our vision, we have even more drive behind purpose. So we've got lots of ideas here. So what we're going to do now is look at the benefit. What is the benefit to the organization? And we're going to put 1 minute on the clock. 1 minute on the clock. How many ideas can you come up with around what are the benefits to the organization if we get all of your ideas together, having everyone contribute? So go ahead and chat that in. So we've got connectedness, buy-in, everyone feels valued, absolutely. Engagement, yes. Moving in the same direction, we'll have follow-through. Creativity, ownership, reducing conflict, yes. We get that intrinsic motivation, so important, less micromanagement, enthusiasm, better ideas and solutions, yes. And notice that was one of the things that we lose is that innovation, right? If we don't include everybody. Big one, reduce turnover. We all know how much it costs to replace folks. Reduce turnover, so important. And I've got 5 seconds left. 5, 4, any more ideas? 3, 2, and 1, and stop typing. We've also got low turnover. Okay, we had low turnover. We've got happy employees. Oh, we love happy employees. Oh my God. Frederick noticing to take us home here that we have a sense of ownership in the strategic strategy. Absolutely. And so this is an awesome foundation for us to go forward now to Jackie, who's going to explain a little bit more about SOAR and take us through to our next couple of activities. So Jackie, anything you want to add before on what I've just mentioned here?
I just want to add that we have more computers than we have humans in my household. Probably times 3. So thank you. That was a very rich chat. As you know, we saved the chat so you can play Pictionary at home with your families and the people you're quarantined with these days. All right, so let's get into a little bit about what is SOAR. Always comes out the SWOT and the SOAR, and then we're going to put you folks to work in your groups today. So SOAR, if you look at SOAR, the operating system of SOAR is appreciative inquiry. And it's really a dialogical approach to strategy. And it's still all about the conversations. And when SOAR emerged back in 1999, it started just traditionally for strategic planning. And if you could start from a strength to a strength place, that would get people opening up to imagining opportunities and talking about aspirations. What do you aspire? What do your stakeholders aspire to? And at the end of the day, what are meaningful and measurable results? So think of appreciative inquiry as that operating system. So it's simply a way to ask questions in a strategic context, and it's a positive framework. Think of positive framing, asking questions to the whole system or representation of the whole system. And we will get into the whole system by module 3. How do you bring the whole system into this? How do you consider the whole system? And it's just asking more generative questions. And some of you said you wanted more practice. You're going to practice this at least 3 more times over the next 3 weeks. We put up here a few organizations using SOAR. We have people from many different industries and walks of life in strategic conversations. And if you look at John Deere, you can read more about John Deere as the global organization in the Thin book. The stories about how the U.S. Army is using a collaborative model. We have a congregation, the UCC, United Church of Christ, over 68 churches coming together to figure out their strategy. These stories are in the article SOAR and Beyond. We're going to bring up Procter & Gamble and Jefferson Wells, and we're going to actually send you book chapters before week 3 if you want to really go in deep and see how is an agenda, what was the story of this executive director or this finance director that decided to lead people through strategic conversations that were whole system based. So there's lots of resources. We thought about you this week, and we'll keep pushing those out. So what I would love to share next is an origination. I call it an origination story. And this was an organization many years ago, back in 2005. And the plan was to close the plant down. So the challenge was, you got to close the plant down. The good news is all of you will have your jobs between 1 and 3 years. You get to come up with the strategy on how to close the plant down and who will be losing their jobs first. And then the plant actually closes down. So that was the challenge. When I walked in with this group, the plant people, they still were not happy that they were going to have to close the plant down. And the first couple of hours, we were in that define stage and having a conversation. You think about a conversation worth having is the positive opposite was, well, can we keep the plant open? But the facilitator's here to close us down. And the question I threw out after somebody said, can we keep the plant open? I said, what if, framing the conversation, if the plant was open, we would be revitalized? And I had to ask the question 3 times. And in the Beyond SOAR article, we talk about that story. They didn't get it the first time. I said, what if we had a strategy for revitalization? Because then they next go, well, how are we going to do this? And we spent literally from 10 a.m. to 2 o'clock on a Monday morning shifting their mindsets and then deciding the next day and a half we would start from a place of strength, get into the innovations of how we could turn this plant around. We talked about the aspirations, and somebody said, well, the aspirations of the senior leaders out on the East Coast is to close us down in 3 years. And what they came up with is, well, what if we put a plan together for a second genuine chance that in 1 year we could start to turn this plant around? And if we could turn this plant around, none of us would lose our jobs. And if we can't turn this plan around in 12 months, then we just have 2 years instead of 3 years to phase this all out. So they really rallied behind it. They spent a day and a half coming up with their plan to revitalization. There's 25 plants throughout the world. They went to, the plant manager went out to the East Coast. The plant has never closed down. They really took the ownership in that. So that's a very meaningful story. It was a very scary situation when you go in. You go in with that fixed mindset. I have to have them come up with a strategy to close the plant down. But we actually shifted that. So that's a story, and you can read more about that in the SOAR 2020 and Beyond article that we wrote. So when you think about SOAR, there were just originally 4 simple questions. What are our greatest assets? That's a strength question. And then opportunities. What can we improve and even innovate? What's our preferred future? And results. How do we know when we see it? What are we going to measure? You will see over 20 years, these questions have shifted slightly. There's more than one way to ask each of these types of questions. But these were the 4 original SOAR questions. So the next slide talks about the 3 ways. And last night, you know, we put this slide together that I sent out to you, the group. We talked about that you can simply use SOAR in everyday conversations. And Sherry and I are going to throw a couple examples out before we put you to work. And then there's a quick SOAR. And a quick SOAR, which we'll talk more about next week, is how do you bring together people for a conversation because they need to come up with a strategy or a strategic plan quickly. And quickly is defined sometimes as 1 hour to 5 hours. And you'll see on the handout we sent you last night, we have several resources that we referred to so that you can go back. So for those of you in education, there's resources on education, people in industry, we have education there, healthcare. And then the 3rd week, we're going to talk about the 5D cycle and SOAR. And this is originally where SOAR was created 20 years ago, but over the years, there's been multiple ways to SOAR, and that's what we have been learning. So just like there's multiple ways to SOAR, there's multiple ways to ask a SOAR question. And these are the types of questions and the ways that you can ask a strength question. And if you go back to the first module where we were talking about the brain, when you start from a place of strength, people have a connection. Their minds begin to open and you can move into opportunities, innovations, ideas, creativity. And then you move forward because you can't do everything. You are limited in resources and time. And that is where you begin to talk about the aspirations of what the employees want, what the customers, what the suppliers. Sometimes it's the aspirations of the community where the organization lives. And then you focus on results. I will tell you in the early days, results was actually the word resources and rewards, but resources and rewards are part of gaining results. So look at SOAR as a framework. Frameworks are fluid, flexible. You're going to see next week that even though SOAR is SOAR, you could actually have a meeting and pull people together and say, hey, we need to look for results. What kind of results? And then you can go back to the S and the O and the A. So we'll talk more about that next week. One thing that you'll get asked a lot, at least the famous question I always get is, are you ignoring weaknesses and threats? Or how does SOAR compare to SWOT? And they're both good. It's a both and. If you think about it, the history of SWOT was written in the 1950s as an analytical tool. Organizations will use SWOT. My organization still uses SWOT, but we use it as an analytical tool to get a pulse. Remember, think of that problem, you name it. What are some of the weaknesses and threats? But think about this. If you're going to design a strategy and you really start droning in on weaknesses and threats, and think about what you learned in the first boot camp, it begins to deplete energy. Think incremental. So what SOAR does, if you think about AI, is it starts with the strengths and the opportunities. SOAR is very dialogical, and it gets into aspirations and results. You can still use SWOT, you can use SOAR, you can use, I always think if you use SWOT, you better use SOAR. and you don't have to, but people know the weaknesses and threats and the problems. That's why they're coming to you on a strategy. So you could actually go back and look at chapter 3 and really look at that. But it's SOAR is good, SWOT is good. They were just different approaches that came out in different times of the strategy world. And one of the ways we like to look at SOAR is if there is a weakness, you can ask the group, this is something we're not good at. We are not good at using Zoom synchronously. Do we want to take that and create a strength? It first becomes an opportunity for training. And then once the team is really good at using virtual technology, then it becomes a capability and the strength of the organizations. You can look at things out there as a threat. And you think of the COVID-19. How many places can you, the opportunity, how many types of organizations are selling masks now? I mean, I have all kinds of masks. I've got one that matches my shirt today. But you can buy all kinds, there's opportunities for organizations. So we're going to take you through 2 examples, and then we're going to put you into your breakout rooms. So think about today, just simply using SOAR-based types of questions when you're with your team, when you're with a colleague, or in your department. So this first challenge is Joe. His name is Joe, and we talk about this in the SOAR 2020. But Joe realized the plant he was running was not achieving production rates, and there were quality issues. That's his challenge. That's his problem. So the positive opposite is, and I need a strategy. He said, how do I improve productivity in my plant? And then Joe began to think, wow, let's assume productivity was meant. That means my people in my plant are engaged and empowered, and we're going to focus on strengths. And so you can look at the SOAR 2020 article and you can actually hear the story in Joe's words. But all he simply started to do is ask a strength question. All right, what are we doing right? And he started putting what are they doing right all over the plant. He did say you would walk into a plant and there was red danger signs and things that were doing wrong, but he started to put things in green to get them to connect. What are we doing right? And what skills need to be further enhanced? And he said that automatically changed the productivity at the plant. And then you went on to see that they started talking about opportunities. What other skills do we need that we don't have that other plants have? So it was simply, he calls it a strengths configuration. So the next story, Sherry, do you want to talk about Southern Veterinarian Partners here?
Sure. This was a veterinary practice that went through the conversation boot camp and subsequently strategic conversations. They wanted to create strategies to do something about poor communication amongst the team. So the strategy was, how are we going to improve our communication? They did a very simple frame, which was, we want effective communication. And then they simply asked 2 different questions. And if you'll notice, this very enterprising young employee at this veterinary practice went home and she created an opportunity tree and laminated it. And when she went to the manager, and she said, can we use this in this meeting about creating effective communication? And so they gave her the floor, and she handed everybody on the team a leaf. And she said, what does great communication look like for us? And each person put their answer on the leaf. And then they chose one of the leaves as a group and asked the question, what's one thing that we can try this week that will support this specifically, or all of these leaves on the tree? And they came up with one thing to try that week, and they kept trying experiments and coming back and saying, did it work? And eventually their communication improved significantly over the course of several weeks.
Thank you, Sherry. So before we go into the activities, one thing I want to point out, and I wrote this down, earlier I said there was more than one way to ask a SOAR-based question. when you have to approach an everyday situation, you can think about the questions, but I would advise you to go out there and find a trusted partner, a colleague at work or a colleague outside of work or a significant other. Never design alone. Always try to design with a partner if you can design. And that's why we've been putting you in groups. But, think about, I want to have a conversation about communications. And these are 2 questions I was going to ask at the next meeting. And in the world of appreciative inquiry, what we've noticed is we spend most of our time crafting the questions and recrafting the questions and making sure that we're using questions that give you energy to move forward. So I'm going to go through the instructions, and then we're going to send you off into your breakout sessions. And what we're going to do is your first step is to name your challenges. So when you're in your breakout room, the facilitators will give you 2 minutes, because if we didn't, you'd spend maybe 8 or 9 minutes listing as many frustrating or inefficient work situations you typically experience or your clients are experiencing. So you'll get 2 minutes to type it in the chat. And then the next step of instructions is, just like we showed you in the 2 examples here, will be to, next slide, what's the strategy we're looking for? What do we really want to, if the strategy, how to improve productivity came true, what would the frame be? We're really talking about engaged and empowered people in the plant. And what are 1 to 3 SOAR-based questions? So you will not be designing alone, you will be designing with team members today. So we're going to put you off into groups for about 12 to 15 minutes today. So you might want to take a minute or 30 seconds just to say hello to your partners and get to work, and then we will come back here at 12:50. You ready, Lisa, to throw us out? I was talking and I was muted. Well, welcome back, everybody. If we could just take 20 seconds and type in the chat how it went. How did it go with your group? Take 20 seconds, type in the chat. Our group covered 2 issues. Take a second and type in the chat, what was your breakout session? Supportive. Ah, Marty, I appreciate the relevance of the work. Great questions generated. Helpful in framing the future. Yeah, you didn't have to come up with these questions alone. Yeah, we did 2 issues, great insights. Our team did too. Collaborative. You can just feel the energy as we walked through what the challenge is. We need a strategy. What's that, and how do we frame it and ask questions? All right, so just want to end up on a little reflection here, and then I'm going to hand it back over to, thank you, Jamie, very engaged. What have you learned that stands out for you? So you kind of just did that in the chat room, but anything else you want to add, what have you learned that really stands out for you based on the 45 minutes we spent together here today, or 50 minutes that we've been together? Or perhaps, what is a key takeaway? The power of talking questions through with others, yes. Okay. People framing the challenge together. Yes, we did that. Thank you. All right, I'm going to just, I want to give you 2 slides more about resources to help you guys move forward with strategy, and then I'm going to turn it over to Sylvette, and we'll open it up to questions. So McKinsey & Company. McKinsey & Company has been around, I believe, for hundreds, probably since the 1950s or the 1960s. So they're the strategy company of the world. And you could actually look into McKinsey Company, and you can get information on McKinsey & Company. But this quote rang to me about 13 years ago, and they said, the highest performing organizations have a clear purpose, their mission. They understand their strengths, they share aspirations, and their leaders know how to unleash ideas with a results-driven process. And this is based on 1,200 global executives and what they were learning. It sounds a little bit like SOAR to me. And we're not here in this module to teach you about strategy, but there is one book I'm going to point out to you so that you don't have to go take a 16-week course on strategy. It's a book called The Strategist, Be the Leader Your Business Needs. I feel like I'm doing a commercial. I don't know Cynthia Montgomery, but it's also available on audio. But she really talks about the importance of understanding, what does your organization do or offer? What do you do or offer? Be really clear what you offer and why. Why does your organization matter? And she asked a question right from the start. If you closed your organization today, would your customers suffer any real loss? And she also points out that a strategist is a person skilled in strategic thinking and strategy. So for those of you who want to take a deeper dive, it's just a popular press book. It's probably my favorite book on strategy, and it's just a recommendation. All right, so I'm going to hand it over to Savette to take us home.
Thank you, Jackie. So I'd like to just sort of pull the pieces together. We really talked about how the importance of bringing all the stakeholders in to talk about the strategy. And Jackie gave that wonderful example about the plant and how brilliant that was. So when we get all minds thinking, and there's it's much more energetic, and the folks are connected to the purpose. And I think that's one of the things that I've realized in strategic sessions that I've led, the energy that comes with when the individuals identify how their own purpose is connecting to the visual, why they're there, how they're making a difference in the world. And you get all of those minds and souls and bodies behind your strategy. It brings an energy that is absolutely indescribable. It really is. It's transformative. So I do encourage you to sort of think about that, and you could do it even with your families at home. So I've done this with my family too, not just in the organization. And the other thing that I want to mention is that we have application activities, as we have done in the past. And there are several here. I'm just going to run through them very quickly. The first one is really trying to identify your organization's vision and mission, and the strategy behind it. Think about how your personal role plays out in your organization. How does it align? If you're a supervisor or a manager, how can you start making that happen for your employees, that they're constantly thinking about the tasks that they're working on, the project they're working on? How is it aligned with the vision of the organization? And have a chat with them, perhaps. And on our activity 2 is thinking about your strengths and your actions. What are you doing, and how does it align with the organization? And number 3 is looking for those opportunities where you can be more engaged in strategic conversations. And as Jackie mentioned, you can do it just as a simple version. It can be just in the corridor, having a strengths conversation, or an opportunities or aspirations. Any one of those could be used at any time. It doesn't have to be the whole framework. And that's what's so exciting about SOAR as well. It's so flexible in how you can use it. Some of the other things are, what do the other stakeholders do? Consider that. How can your team, the other stakeholders, talk strategically? And what opportunities do you see for your development and growth that are aligning with the value, vision, and mission? And I think we have one more. Is that right, Tony? Nope, that was it. So here we go. We're closing us out with a quote from Morris Chang. Without strategy, execution is aimless. Without execution, strategy is useless. So on that note, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll hand it back to Sherry. You want to wrap us out?